this week, Pat Robertson had said something hideous about gay people in San Francisco. He was spreading misinformation on the 700 Club, and he actually wiped his archives of that statement because there was so much lashback for what he said. Now, for those of you who forgot what he said about gay people in San Francisco, I want to read you his quote verbatim. Someone had written into the show, it was a woman who has to drive someone with HIV or is, positive for HIV, and she was concerned about it. And Pat Robertson talked about how HIV runs rampant in the gay community, and he also said the following: I think people in the gay community, they want to get people. They'll have a ring and you shake hands and the ring has a little thing where you cut your finger. And his co-host Terry said, really? And he said, really? It is that kind of vicious stuff which would be the equivalent of murder. So basically, he is saying that gay people in San Francisco are going around spreading HIV and AIDS because they're vicious, hideous people. As I said, they cleared their archive of that statement because of the fact that people were so enraged and outraged by that. And instead of apologizing for it, now Pat Robertson is doubling down. He contacted the Atlantic Wire and he said the following: in my own experience, our organization sponsored a meeting years ago in San Francisco where trained security officers warned me about shaking hands because in those days, certain AIDS-infected activists were deliberately trying to infect people like me by virtue of rings which would cut fingers and transfer blood. I regret that my remarks had been misunderstood, which they were not, but this often happens because people do not listen to the context of remarks which are being said. In no ways were my remarks meant as an indictment of the homosexual community or, for that fact, to those infected with this dreadful disease.
So first, they're going after everybody that showed the video. They're like, how dare you show something we actually said? And then they're like, okay, well, we're going to apologize for it, except we're not going to apologize for it. I'm going to repeat my insane theory about the gay people cutting people with rings, etc. And then my favorite part, me? Oh, I would never say anything wrong about the gay community. Is that right, Pat? Here's what you forgot: recording machines. And J.R. Jackson, our producer, who captures those recordings and puts them all together. Watch.
There are a lot of people who are into this homosexual thing because they've been abused by a parent, abused by a coach, abused by a sibling. Jay, let me ask you about Anthony Kennedy. Does he have some clerks who happen to be gays? In the second chapter of Romans, it's very explicit. I would think it is somehow related to demonic possession. It was because they had forsaken God. It was not something that, is natural. And it didn't matter who he did it with, because Sean Derritt wanted it that badly. He was hungry for it. So for 7 years, Sean trolled the streets, longing for cheap sex with other men. He said it's an offense. It's an abomination for a man to lie with a man as with a woman. That's what it says. And those who do that in the Old Testament were stoned to death. They somehow think, well, I must be gay. Well, they aren't. They're heterosexual, and they just need to come out of that. A person who has acquired this can unacquire it. There are others, maybe they've got some chromosomal damage that's different from heterosexuals, and that's what, of course, they claim. That the nations who were doing these things were vomited out of the lands. That's what the gays want. They want everything now in their favor. The land vomited them out. Homosexuality, is it something that they're born with? It's something that's acquired. I think a lot of it is acquired. And if you do this stuff, the land's going to vomit you out too. We're not anti-gay or anti-anything, but I just do believe in the Bible.
We're not anti-gay. The land just vomited them, or whatever the hell he said there. Yeah. He's insane.
And the Bible says stone them to death, but I would in no way be against the homosexual community. I don't know what you're talking about. And my favorite was his story about Sean. Sean looks like he had a good time trolling the streets for men.
For cheap
sex with men. He was hungry for it. It seemed like Pat was hungry for it there. And again with the theory, he says they could acquire it and then they can unacquire it. My theory on that is the people who say that are bisexual, right? Because they think, well, at some point I was kind of into dudes, but I got beyond it. And then now I'm mainly into girls. right?
Yep.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, probably,
So that's
yeah.
why he's like, well, I don't. It's a choice. What do you mean? I know it's a choice. You can unacquire it like me. I mean, did I say that out loud? What? Okay. And so, but put that aside. It doesn't really matter whether that's the case or not. It's pretty obvious from the tape that Pat Robertson is not a friend of the gay community. It's obvious from his quote that he still believes in his insane theories about gay people trying to give AIDS to straight people like Pat Robertson. And the third thing that's obvious is that he has lost his neck somewhere. Somebody please find it.